And Glenn plays in a couple different bands. He plays country, but he likes rock and roll better, right?
You know, it's rock and roll. So we're talking guitars. It's a guitar-centered genre. That is the main instrument of the genre. That's the symbol. Your job there is to make the band work, fill in your purpose, provide the keyboard sounds that they want. And it means being a good player. Okay, welcome back to episode 2 of 12 Tone Warrior. And I'm going to title this episode AEA. Those are initials for ambition, expectation, and approach. I suppose that last one could also be called attitude, but I'll go with approach on that one. AEA. And what do I mean by that? Well, before I get into anything else on this channel, like showing you maybe some exercises on the keyboard, I'm going to do all kinds of things like that. I'll show you all kinds of video footage from past gigs, and I'll go into, I'm going to do a lot of stuff on here, but the first thing I want to do is just get a little philosophical about it and expand on what I was talking about in the first episode as to why you would do this in the first place, maybe at the age you are, and so on. So I'm basically saying, let's have a discussion on, basically, you have an ambition, you want to do this music, you get out there in the world, you realize there's an expectation that both I have to have and that people have of me, and that has to be worked out. And then there's your approach to people as you're going about this. In other words, there's a kind of learning experience you have to go through. It involves some rewards as well as some setbacks. It involves getting realistic about what you're doing, and to expand on that a little. Since this is going to be a channel largely and mainly about live performance and for classic rock keyboard players, largely who want to get into this, if they're not into it already, then what I want to do is there's sort of a reset that I had to do in my mind as I went through, what I was aiming for as a keyboard player all these years. And basically, if you go back to, say, the 80s and 90s when I started out, the music industry and the kind of people you had to appeal to, the kind of compromises you had to make, those were all things that everyone realized and followed suit on those things. And then if you found yourself, I wasn't going to get a contract, this kind of stuff wasn't going to happen, I wasn't going to be in this band or something, a lot of people then went into whatever else you could get into. I had a lot of friends, like former bandmates, for instance, from Rutgers, that some of them went touring and did the hauling and lugging work for the bands, basically roadie work. And then they would meet band members, and then they would sort of get into the current music industry that they were trying to get into. So there was a lot of stuff like that going around. And, and so basically what happens is, at some point, when I think I reached maybe 45, 50, I had to do kind of a reset in my mind as to what do I want out of it? What am I ultimately going to get out of this? And I say to myself, well, I really should be playing the music I really want to play and find people with a common cause. And in order to do that, you shouldn't get too, in order to find people with common cause, your music shouldn't be too out there. It should be music probably that you grew up with, that other people, you knew other people liked. It might be hit songs. It might be stuff like, album tracks and things like that. But the main thing is you no longer have, since all this stuff tied to the music industry has kind of gone to the wayside. It's all changing. People are just becoming independent artists anyway, unsigned and having some degree of success. So with that in mind, there's no music industry I have to try to appeal to that's kind of against my musical tastes or interests. So this way, I just plow through my own way, the way I want to do this. And what I found is I've had more success just as a local artist than I've ever had before when I was trying to appeal to music industry tastes. That's this philosophical foundation upon which I want this channel to be built on. That's the way we're going to think about music and creating music. Okay, so that's the first A in the 3-letter secret government initials AEA. Yes, all right. So that's the first A. Ambition is you have an ambition to do this. You no longer feel like you have to make any compromises other than finding like-minded musicians, and then you go for it. So the next one is E, is the expectation. And this is an important thing that you have to go through as far as how you might meet fellow musicians that you can be in a band with. So the expectation, I think, for keyboard players who don't sing, which is the category I fall into, I can do backup vocals and have done them, but I just do not have a very good singing voice, and I just never tried to develop it. But I can hit the tones. Basically, as a musician, even if you don't have a good singing voice, you need to be able to sing the tones, like and such. So I've done backups decently, but my strength is as a all hands-on classic rock keyboard player. So that means, my specialty is anything keyboards can do, including the traditional acoustic and electromechanical sounds, piano, organ, EP, clav, and so on, as well as synthesized sounds. As a keyboard player, your band will expect, there's the expectation, this of you. They will want, for the genre I'm in, which for the classic rock stuff that I do, because I do country as well, that's mostly centered in the 70s. So there will be things that come up, like on a Jimmy Buffett song, you'll have the tropical sound of like the steel drums or something that you have to get in there. You're going to be expected to, besides having the meat and potatoes sound, you're going to have all these other little sounds that that my Kurzweil and the Yamaha too have in droves. They have all, and so also with this expectation is the expectation coming from you. That is to say, what's my function? Where do I fit in with regards to being in a band? Should I form my own band? That's a good question. And certainly there have been keyboard players, great and famous keyboard players that did that, especially ones who sing, who present. And that's a discussion we're going to get into just in a little bit about who is the presenter of the band. As a keyboard player, unless you sing, like Billy Joel or Elton John, it's not likely you're going to be the front person, the person presenting the band. And as such, your likelihood of forming a band just as a keyboard player, even if you're a strong arranger and band leader, that's just not likely in classic rock. Usually the way it goes here, and this is, again, we're working on expectation, is that, it's rock and roll. So we're talking guitars. It's a guitar-centered genre. That is the main instrument of the genre. That's the symbol. That's the, you get it, right? It's guitar-based music, and you're bringing in the ability to add different colors and textures and things that the guitar can't offer. So with regard to this expectation thing, you fit in a certain way. Your job isn't to present. The presenters are most likely either going to be a lead vocalist who just holds a mic and doesn't play an instrument, like Robert Plant and such, or is a guitarist who sings and is fronting the band. So the person or people that are presenting the music to the audience in the world of trying to find local people to hook up with, local bands, that's going to be a guitarist who sings. That's likely who you're going to find. And that's basically the way it worked out with me with regard to both of the bands I'm in. And especially so with Sheepdick, them being a classic rock band. We're basically a band of buddies. No one's trying to upstage anyone else and be the leader, although, technically speaking, the band started with certain two, key members of the band, and our rehearsal space is at the place of one of those two key members of the band. And those two key members of the band are the guitarists and they're also the singers. So they're the people that are up front presenting the music to the audience. They started the band and they needed a keyboard player. So that's where you come in. That's your opportunity to be a well-rounded classic rock keyboard player. So that entails not just being able to do piano fairly well, not just being able to do organ fairly well, but you have to have all these other sounds in there that the original recordings have and that it demands of you. So essentially, as a keyboard player, your role is as a, strength and support and backup for the band. You're a band member, and you're contributing equally along with the drummer, bass player, rhythm guitarist in creating the bass sound that the singer and lead guitarist and everything is playing upon. So with expectation now discussed, we're going to get into the last one, which is approach or attitude, because now we're at the stage where you're making you're doing auditions. All right, so your best way to go about this to have any success would be to find a band that needs a keyboard player, and then that's where this thing called approach comes in. So your approach, or I guess you could also say attitude, should be to make that band work. Give that band what they're looking for in a keyboard player. And this is going to mean, likely you're not going to get to play all of the, the complicated, progressive, secret, underground, proggy stuff that you ever dreamed of doing. I was certainly like that. I mean, up to a point. Because the base of me is really in classic rock with extensions of prog, fusion, jazz, all these other areas I went out. But then I just come home to classic rock, which is where I feel the most comfortable as a musician. So this approach thing is that, yes, you're not going to get, you want to connect with these other musicians where they are, and hopefully they connect with you where you are, and you meet in the middle and you find these common bonds, usually having to do with songs that you always wanted to play, that they always wanted to play, songs that they needed a keyboard player for in order to play. In other words, so with regards to Sheep Dip, for instance, when they first started out, the band goes back to, as you can see on the shirt, 2002. I joined in 2017. And as I look back at their history, they largely started kind of as a more laid-back, rootsy kind of thing, kind of like more Grateful Dead, Allman Brothers, the band, Jonathan Edwards, kind of crunchy, folky, but still rock, still electric guitar and keyboards and stuff. But as they started moving on into the next decade, they really wanted to pick it up with things like Steely Dan and the Doobie Brothers and a little Hall and Oates and kind of bring some more sophistication into the band. And so they had a few lineup changes, and I was one of the people that came along to kind of fulfill the keyboard role in that, and I came along with a new bass player, and this new bass player was really filling out the bottom really well, so it kind of rejuvenated the band. And that's what you want to set your sights on, is the ability to take a band that's out there and could use some help. Maybe they lost their current keyboardist, or they're just looking to add one, and this is where you can come in and help them out and be that person that is valuable to the band's needs. One of the most important aspects with regard to attitude or approach, the last A in the three initials, is how you communicate musically with the other band members. Your ability to listen and learn. Listen, going all the way back to how you listen to the original studio recording or live recording, whatever you're trying to copy or emulate, is your ability to basically not be too technical about it with the other musicians, other than, yes, we all have to know what the basic chord structure and melodic lines, whatever we're responsible for playing or executing on stage. It's much more valuable as a musician to be able to learn and play by ear. Basically, it makes you a better soloist if you can do that. Basically, you have to have a kind of musicality that you share with the other musicians that goes beyond, yes, this is the A chord, that's the B chord, etc. There's just a way to, it's a kind of musical communication. It's a kind of thing that locks in when everyone feels that they're on the same page. All right, so you probably noticed that not only do I call myself 12-Tone Warrior, but in my opening titles I have the words "The Weekend Warrior's Guide to," and that's meant to be kind of, a little facetious, like that term yacht rock is meant to be a little facetious. It's a little jab at, what I do, what we do, as older musicians playing this music. But that's a thing that, where did that come from? Why do you call yourself a warrior or a weekend warrior? But that's kind of a pejorative term that came up on music or keyboard or guitar forums about a certain kind of lifestyle that people, if you have a full-time job but you do gigs on the weekend, that's what we call being a weekend warrior. So a few other issues that come up with regard to this AEA phenomenon that I'm talking about is, and I guess this has to do more with expectation, is like, well, do you play with one keyboard or two? This is something that sometimes comes up with regard to maybe some members of the band don't want you using up a lot of stage space. Even though stacking keyboards doesn't really do that, it doesn't take up any more horizontal space. But yeah, the question often comes up, do I use 1, 2, or 3 boards? How many do I use? And that largely has to do with a lot of us older keyboard players, when we played piano, we played it on a real piano with the weighted keys, because basically they're levers that knock a hammer on the other end that hits the string. So you would want to play that on a real, on something that feels like a real piano, such as a digital piano or a workstation with 88 weighted keys. And of course your other board would have the lighter synth weighted or organ weighted keys that are more springy and spongy, and that you can just do palm smears on it and without causing your hand to bleed. So just for that reason, a lot of older players, they want a piano keyboard for playing piano, an organ keyboard for playing organ. But then it goes beyond that. It goes beyond how much real estate you think you need to pull off what you do, and cutting back on the hassle of having to create splits in your keyboard. So for instance, maybe you think you can do this with just one keyboard, one, say, 88 key keyboard, and then you're going to create splits whenever you have to have piano and organ going on at the same time. But then you're limited on space, on where you can play the piano. You have to remember where the split point is, and then, or else, you'd be soloing on piano and then hit low organ notes on your top end of your piano solo. And then you're playing organ on weighted keys. So it's just not ideal. I think having 2 boards for that purpose, it just makes it work. It makes it work better, and you avoid those splits. You have your whole full 88 key keyboard to knock yourself out on playing piano, and sometimes in this music, a split might be, I might have to have 3 sounds going on at the same time, in which case I'll create a split on one of the boards. But yeah, that's something that has to do with how you would present yourself on stage. Another thing that comes up, do you sit or stand as a keyboard player? And it seems just like a non-consequential question, and it's something that hardly anyone talks about on the internet or on forums, yet here I am, because occasionally it does come up. And I think that just has to do with how you're comfortable playing. It's also related somewhat to stage presentation for the genre you represent. So if you're doing, say, 80s stuff, 80s synth pop, yeah, that's going to be a kind of thing where you'd have like a single synthesizer on a stand right out in the front of the stage, maybe 2 of them, and your lead singer would be playing on that while singing. So it's something like Duran Duran. Whereas something like in a 70s stage presentation, your keyboard player would be playing behind a bank of keyboards off to the left or right of the stage, usually facing or looking at the other band members. So that's more the you want to kind of be more true to the genre you're trying to mimic or emulate, and as a result, I've always sat as a player because my main instrument out of all the keyboards is piano. So, I'm always, I always have my foot, ready to hit the damper pedal or whatever. And I just prefer to sit because the piano, that is an instrument where you're supposed to sit. It was designed that way. Same thing with the organ. You sit to play the organ, a church organ, or whatever. So yeah, sitting or standing, I would say kind of like 80s synth pop and maybe other related genres. It's more about standing. Although in classic rock, and especially even in prog, you get a lot of standing keyboard players because they're trying, someone like Rick Wakeman or Keith Emerson, they're trying to put on a big presentation and they have all these keyboards left and right all around them. So it's better for them to just be mobile and stand. Whereas I'm a little more like the Tony Banks, if you wanted to talk about prog keyboard players, Tony Banks, who is a sitter and basically with a lot of 70s rock. That's really what you get. But by sitting, it doesn't mean you're sitting real low. Usually the drummer in most bands that I've played with and in the two I'm in, I actually sit higher than the drummer. The drummer usually sits in a low riding position, and I'm up almost at what you would call stool position, not chair position. And so really when I'm sitting, I'm almost standing. It's like my thighs are not, don't create a 90-degree angle with my calves. It's sort of like they're at an angle. So it's more like I'm in a slightly raised position on my stool. But I'm still sitting because, handling all the pedals and when to hit the right pedal at the right time, I might have to lean my body this way a little. And when you're trying to do that all while standing, it's pretty tough. Since we talked a lot about joining a band, as possibly your better alternative as a non-singing keyboard player, one important thing to discuss would be, should you join more than one band? And that's something I've gone through a lot of. And I've basically been able to settle it to down to two bands. It's not like I was in 3 or 4 simultaneous bands. That's something you probably don't want to do because of scheduling issues. You're basically going to create, possible resentment with other band members that you're trying to be a jack of all trades keyboard player for your local area. And that's probably something you shouldn't do. You should really commit to if you're in more than one band, one of those bands needs to be the one you're truly committed to, and will make, so that if you have any scheduling overlaps, that's going to be the one you'll go to. And you should probably limit this to no more than 2 bands, in my opinion, unless you are just really good at finagling scheduling conflicts. So basically, over the last 7 or so years, I've been able to do 2 bands, and I got kind of lucky in that scheduling conflicts hardly come up because one band seems to book more on Saturdays and the other books more on Fridays and things like that. So, you want to play your cards and do what you can. Make as much money and do as much band activity as you can, but don't overdo it. I would say probably no more than 2 bands would be smart. One last quite important thing in order to make both gigging and communicating musically with other band members a much easier flow is you should really have everything memorized. You should have all the music you're going to be playing memorized, not have chord charts in front of you at gigs, because it looks like you're in a chamber ensemble when you do that. You exude confidence to the audience when you don't have sheet music in front of you. Now, for vocalists who have all of those lyrics to, have to memorize, we use, sometimes we'll use iPads for that will be low on the microphone stand that the vocalist can look down to. I think that's completely forgivable if you're a singer. That's a lot of lyrics to remember, as well as your, the melodic lines you have to remember. But if you're an instrumentalist in the band, yeah, you need to memorize everything. The only piece of paper you should have by your side is your set list. Don't overplay. Very important. Don't try to be a show-off and, show you can do the most shredding, amazing solos. And your job there is to make the band work. Fill in your purpose. Provide the keyboard sounds that they want. And it means being a good player and being a good soloist, being a good melodic soloist, but it does not mean, it does not mean trying to be the bee's knees. That's not what you're going to be doing here. Again, you're playing a major support role here, an important one, but it's a support role nonetheless. But you can have a lot of fun doing that support role, and you have an edge over, say, a guitarist who doesn't sing. If you're, say, a guitarist who does only rhythm, doesn't sing, and doesn't play lead very well, you're not going to be very valuable to a band when you go to audition for them. But as a keys player, you provide a whole palette of sounds that the band wants. So if you don't sing, you still have more value than, say, a rhythm guitarist who doesn't sing. And the most important thing about stage presence, or how you present yourself to the audience in the genre that you're in, is to look the part. Basically, dress well, on stage, and look like you're having fun. In fact, you should be having fun. If you're not having fun, this is probably something that isn't really up your wheelhouse. So you want to, bop around a little and move to the music, and don't stare down at your shoes, because the classic rock genre isn't that kind of music. It isn't shoegaze. It's like you should be looking alive and you're having fun doing what you're doing. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of 12 Ton Warrior, and if you did, be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you the next time around.
This one's going to feature the good blend. He's here.
All right.
Little sugar loaf for you.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
wasted love. She lives her life to me. Green-eyed lady feels the life I never see. Selling sun and lonely lovers free.
A good Glenn on keyboards.